Okay, let's unpack this. We're embarking on a deep dive today into Chinua Achebe's monumental African trilogy.
Mm,
And this isn't just, the study of three excellent novels. It's an exploration of a century of seismic, systemic, and, well, spiritual transformation.
absolutely.
We're really witnessing the Anglo-Igbo encounter across three generations in Nigeria, and it's chronicled with just staggering precision.
It's absolutely the mission. I mean, our source material here, things fall apart, arrow of God, and no longer at ease. They're just essential reading
Right.
because they function as this um, unified, devastating historical document. They show us this coherent, structured society facing external disruption.
And then what?
Well, then adapting to established colonial rule and then finally collapsing into this flawed, compromised reality of modern independence. The whole arc.
And the man who crafted this entire narrative arc, Chinua Achebe, he's often rightfully hailed as the father of modern African literature.
He really is, and his timing was crucial.
Huh.
He was born in 1930. That's precisely halfway through the official colonial period, which, spanned from 1900 to 1960.
So he literally witnessed the entire arc of change in his own lifetime.
That biographical context is everything. Achebe's core motivation, the driving force behind the trilogy, was a profound cultural urgency. He believed so deeply that the writer's most crucial contribution was to give his or her people a usable past.
A usable past. What does that actually mean in this
I-
context?
Well, you have to remember what was going on. European literature, from Joyce Carey's Mr. Johnson onward, had largely depicted Africans as either like noble savages or as simple, unintelligent, laughing children.
Right. Very one-dimensional.
Exactly. So Achebe's task was nothing less than recovering the dignity of the Igbo people.
He wasn't trying to deny the immense changes that colonialism brought, was he?
No, not at all. He acknowledged that it had changed his homeland deeply and irrevocably, but he was absolutely insistent on demonstrating the profound continuities that existed with the pre-colonial past.
So he wanted his people to draw strength and self-respect from their own history.
Precisely. From the fact that their world was complex, it was sophisticated, and it was governed by deep-seated principles, long before the white man ever arrived.
And the trilogy itself is so perfectly structured to map this historical transition.
It's incredible. Things fall apart is the shock. It's the moment of first arrival and the initial fracturing of the Muofia society.
Right. And then Arrow of God.
That moves us into the established era of colonial administration. It focuses on the immense pressures exerted by indirect rule in a place called Umaro, right around the time Achebe himself was actually born.
And then we jump forward in time, a generation or two, it feels like, to no longer at ease.
Which is a portrait of the educated elite grappling with all these internal pressures of modernity.
And that novel shifts the scene so dramatically. We go from the communal village setting to the bustling, individualistic, and frankly corrupt metropolis of Lagos.
Yeah, during the final uneasy days of empire. It's a journey from tradition to tragic internalized failure.
That's our map for this deep dive.
Let's do it.
So to really grasp the scale of the tragedy that unfolds, you have to spend time appreciating the society that Achebe describes in the early sources.
Absolutely.
Let's start with the bedrock foundation of pre-colonial Igbo society, particularly in Umufia. This is the world of Okonkwo.
Okay, so the first thing you must understand about Okonkwo's world is that it was, for better or for worse, a fierce meritocracy. It was defined by achievement and status.
And Okonkwo, the protagonist of Things Fall Apart, he is just the embodiment of this relentless drive.
He is. His entire being is dominated by one deep, psychological, and very intimate fear.
Which is,
The terror of resembling his father, Unoka.
Unoka is presented in the sources as just the absolute antithesis of everything valued in Umufia. He wasn't just poor.
No, he was a failure, a loafer, perpetually in debt. We hear the specific anecdote about his neighbor, Okoye, coming to demand the return of 200 cowries he had borrowed 2 years prior.
And Unoka's reaction is just incredible.
He just laughed and said he couldn't possibly pay back small debts when he had bigger ones to worry about. It shows a complete disregard for the social contract.
And the linguistic insult used to describe Unoka and what Okonkwo feared most for himself was this word, agbala.
Yes, and we learn that agbala literally means woman, but in the social context, it means a man who has taken no title.
A man who is essentially worthless.
Exactly. And this word, this fear of being perceived as effeminate or weak, It becomes the engine of Okonkwo's entire life.
So every rash decision, every overblown display of masculine aggression.
Every harsh word against his own family, it's all an attempt to distance himself violently from the ghost of his father.
That distinction between the failure of Unoka and the ambition of a man of title is just so crucial. Respect was earned, it wasn't inherited.
And Achebe captures this in one of the most famous proverbs of the trilogy. If a child washed his hands, he could eat with kings.
It's a statement of pure meritocracy.
It is. Okonkwo, through sheer grim struggle, had cracked his own palm kernels. He achieved fame as a champion wrestler, he amassed a huge barn of yams, married 3 wives. He literally manufactured his own worth from nothing.
But such a rigorous value system, it must have required a complex legal structure to maintain balance.
It did. And this brings us to the fascinating detail of governance and justice in Umuofia, specifically the role of the Egwugu.
The Igbo, they are more than just judges, aren't they? They're like the physical manifestation of law and tradition.
That's a great way to put it. They are masked masqueraders who impersonate the ancestral spirits. Achebe details how they were the most secret and powerful cult in the clan.
And their appearance was sacred, terrifying, and psychologically binding. I think the source says no woman ever saw the inside of the hut where they emerged.
That's right. It reinforces their divine authority.
We see them in action, and this scene is just so vital because it demonstrates the Igbo legal system's concern for due process and a nuanced outcome, not just arbitrary punishment.
Yes. The case involving Uzolu, the husband, who claims his wife, Migbafo, and his children were taken aback by her family.
Uzolu's perspective is purely transactional. He's like, I paid the bride price. She is my property.
But Migbafo's family counters with this devastating reality.
Yeah.
Uzolu had beaten Migbafo so violently that she miscarried. Her brother, Odugwe, explains she fled to save her life.
Which is completely understandable. So what's the ruling?
What's fascinating is the Egwugu ruling. It isn't a simple guilty or not guilty. It's pragmatic mediation steeped in custom.
Okay.
They ruled that Migbafo's children still legally belong to Uzolu because of the bride price. But, and this is the key part, Migbafo will only return if Uzolu begs his in-laws, bringing wine.
Yeah.
And on the strict condition that if he ever beats her again, her brothers will cut off his genitals for him.
Wow. That is a harsh yet perfectly balanced piece of jurisprudence.
It is. The authority of the Egwubu, in this case, the masked spirit evil forest presiding, it upholds the custom of the children belonging to the husband, but the severity of the threat ensures the wife's safety.
It's a mechanism that uses spiritual authority to enforce communal harmony and prevent personal tyranny. It's far from primitive.
And that sophisticated balance, it just permeates every aspect of their culture, especially language and fate. The appreciation for skilled conversation is captured perfectly in the observation that proverbs are the palm oil with which words are eaten.
I love that line. Language wasn't just communication, it was an art form. It added grace and depth to every transaction.
Whether asking for a loan, like Okoye did with Unoka, or negotiating a settlement.
This elegance even extends to their philosophical understanding of fate, which is encapsulated by the concept of chi.
Their personal god.
Right, and it's often misunderstood as just fatalism, but Achebe clarifies the agency involved. When a man says yes, his chi says yes also.
Exactly. Chi is less about some predetermined destiny and more about aligning your destiny with your determined will.
So Okonkwo achieved success because he said yes very strongly, so his chi agreed.
It's an interactive system. Your personal deity doesn't just hand you success, it affirms your ambition and hard work. It provides the spiritual scaffolding for their meritocracy.
And the social glue holding all this together is so evident in the customs of the life cycle. Think about the economic foundation of sharecropping.
Right. If you were a young man like Okonkwo, starting with nothing, you needed a wealthy patron to give you seed yams.
But you cultivated them, and you only got to keep 1/3 of the harvest. It was a rigorous path to building your own barn. It really shows the vulnerability of youth and the power of established wealth.
But wealth was always meant to be shared and celebrated publicly. We see this in the intricate marriage rites, like the bride price discussion and the communal feast for Obiorika's daughter's wedding.
The sources detailed this massive communal effort, the slaughtering of fat goats, the enormous pots of palm wine brought by the in-laws. It's an economy of massive social capital exchange.
And the bride then spends 7 market weeks with her suitor's family. It's a phased integration, showing that marriage is a relationship between 2 clans, not just 2 individuals.
Even the darkest spiritual beliefs are explored in such detail, like the Ogbanje phenomenon.
The idea that children die and return repeatedly to torment their mother.
Yeah, and when Okonkwo's favorite daughter, Azinma, falls sick, he brings in the medicine man, Okaguyonwa, to dig up her Iyua.
The buried ritual object that binds the spirit to the world.
It's not just presented as superstition, it's a fully functional, albeit tragic, system of meaning. It governed medical response, family life, emotional survival.
And that's Achebe's whole point. He is insisting that this world, which the colonizers would deem barbaric and chaotic, had a deep governing internal logic. It was a complete world poised for devastation.
And now we arrive at that devastation, the collision, this perfectly ordered, if, rigid and sometimes brutal world is hit by the external shock of the British presence.
And Achebe charts this transition brilliantly, starting with the immediate visceral fear in things fall apart and building to the institutional failure and arrow of God.
The first warning sign is just terrifying and immediate. Obirika brings news from the village of Abame.
Right. They killed a single white man who had arrived alone, tied his iron horse, his bicycle to a tree, and then, inexplicably, the white men returned later and simply wiped the entire village out.
Yeah.
Men, women, children, everyone.
The psychological impact of that event cannot be overstated.
No, it established an immediate precedent of disproportionate, unimaginable violence. Obirika's observation just rings with dread. He notes there is no story that is not true about these strangers and their terrifying power.
Their response to a single death was total obliteration. It suggests a ruthlessness that's just beyond the scope of traditional warfare.
And this ruthlessness becomes formalized in the administrative structure that follows. So we move from the shock of the first novel to the cold machinery of the colonial government in Arrow of God, exemplified by figures like Captain Winterbottom.
Winterbottom represents that classic, disdainful colonial administrator who views the native structure as inherently deficient.
He's the one who complains that the British had to invent chiefs where there were none before.
And that detail is so critical because Igbo society operated on a segmentary system. There were no kings or centralized monarchies for the British to simply take over.
Exactly. This is the failure of indirect rule in Igbo land. The British, who were obsessed with ruling through recognizable to them native authority, created these warrant chiefs.
Men who were suddenly vested with unprecedented power.
And often chosen not for traditional status, but because they were convenient or compliant, or maybe they could speak some English. And these warrant chiefs were seen as illegitimate tyrants by the people. It led to massive friction and corruption because they lacked the traditional restraints of the Igwugu or the elders.
The district commissioner's office, despite claiming to bring peaceful administration and a court of law under a great queen, is entirely self-serving.
Completely. They operate in a bubble of European prestige. Winterbottom tells his subordinates to avoid undignified details, like dealing with the corpse of a hanged man. The administrators are just separated by language, culture, and extreme arrogance from the people they supposedly govern.
But the institutional collision runs parallel to a profound religious one.
Right. The missionaries arrive, and initially the new faith is met with, well, confusion and mockery.
The initial presentation is almost comical. When the missionaries first preach in Abanta, the crowd erupts in laughter because the Igbo interpreter speaks a strange dialect.
And he accidentally substitutes my buttocks for myself.
It's such a great moment. It emphasizes how easily the profound message of a new religion can be distorted and dismissed through cultural and linguistic barriers.
And Okonkwo, with his characteristic directness, immediately highlights the theological problem. The missionary speaks of the single God having a son, Jesus Christ.
And Okonkwo demands to know. He must have a wife then.
Which perfectly summarizes the polytheistic-monotheistic disconnect. The European concept of the Holy Trinity simply fails to fit the indigenous framework. It doesn't make sense.
However, the early missionaries, particularly Sipper Brown in Umofia, they're very strategic.
Very. Brown realized that a frontal attack on the local religion would never work. His genius, or perhaps his insidious effectiveness, lay in using education and medicine as tools of evangelization.
He made friends with influential figures like Akuna and opened a school and a hospital,
making Christianity the gateway to success in the white man's new world.
That relationship between Mr. Brown and Akuna leads to one of the most intellectually compelling theological discussions in the entire trilogy.
That's fantastic. Akuna explains that they approached Chukwu, the overlord, through the smaller gods, the traditional deities. He uses this beautiful analogy.
It's like approaching a great, important man through his servants.
Right, they worry the little gods more because they are afraid to worry their master. They acknowledge Chukwu as supreme.
But Brown insists on the absolute, direct approach, stressing that in his religion, Chukwu is a loving father who need not be feared.
And that is the essential clash. A religion of fear and appeasement versus a religion of direct, loving access. And Brown's strategy was successful because it provided a ladder into the modern world.
But the most radical and destabilizing aspect of the religious front came not from the European pastors.
No, it came from the native converts, particularly the Osu.
The Osu, they were outcasts or slaves dedicated to a god, and they were forbidden to mix with the freeborn in any way.
So their inclusion into the Christian church was a massive social and spiritual affront. It instantly turned the church into this radical anti-establishment force.
When Mr. Kiaga insisted the Othu converts shave off their long, tangled hair, which traditionally denoted their outcast status and was feared by the freeborn, it was a physical act of defiance.
And by surviving the shaving, they proved the traditional prohibitions were baseless. It demonstrated the power of the new god to override ancient taboos.
This zeal then led to catastrophic actions.
It was one of these radical Osu converts who committed the ultimate sacrilege in Mabanta, killing the sacred royal python,
which was addressed as our father, and revered as the emanation of the god of water. This wasn't just converting, it was active, violent defiance that shattered the social fabric.
So all these elements, the arbitrary colonial power, the administrative failure, the radical religious conversion, they all culminate in the central tragedy of Arrow of God.
The downfall of Izulu, the chief priest of Ulu in Umuaro.
Izulu is Achebe's most complex figure. He's not ignorant to the changes. He's trying to be politically savvy.
Right. He deliberately sent his son, Odush, to the white man's school,
intending for the boy to be his eye and ear. He's attempting to acquire the white man's knowledge while maintaining his traditional authority, a very tricky balancing act.
But his wisdom is crippled by his immense pride.
And the main conflict arises when the British administration, seeking to humiliate him or test his loyalty, imprisons him for a short time. When he returns, Izulu uses his priestly office for a personal vendetta against his own community, Umaro.
Because he felt they had failed to support him against the white man.
Exactly. And his action is devastatingly simple, but culturally complex.
Yeah.
He refuses to announce the New Yam feast.
Which is essential. It marks the end of the old year and grants permission to harvest the new crops.
But because of his time in jail, he still had 3 sacred yams left from the previous year, and tradition forbade him from announcing the new feast until they were all consumed.
So it's a deliberate spiritual siege. He believes that the god Ulu is on his side, telling him, "Who told you that this was your own fight?"
He convinces himself that Ulu is using him to punish Umaro for questioning the god's authority. But the community is facing starvation. The crops are ripe on the vine, rotting in the sun, and no one dares harvest without the priest's word.
This is where the structural integrity of the old religion finally breaks.
It is. The community is staring at famine, and Mr. Goodcountry, the missionary, sees a perfect, pragmatic opportunity. He tells the people that if they bring their thank offering, their first yams, to the Christian church, they can harvest without fear of Ulu.
It becomes a transaction, religious adherence for physical survival.
And the result is a mass defection. A flood of people turning to the Christian God for permission to harvest, simply to save their families from hunger.
This irrevocably weakens Ulu's power and destroys Zulu's authority. The community chose practicality over theology.
And the cost is immediately personal and tragic. Shortly after the crisis, Zulu's highly ambitious son, Obika, dies suddenly after exerting himself on a strenuous ceremonial run.
And the community interprets this as the god Ulu rejecting his priest, punishing the family for the priest's arrogance.
Right. The sources note that the people conclude that when a man blasphemes Ulu, the man's own family is punished. The whole structure of divine authority has collapsed, replaced by a faith that allows the people to eat.
So the colonial encounter wasn't just a political change, it was a religious substitution driven by agricultural necessity.
That's it, exactly.
So the arc of destruction moves into its final phase with No Longer at Ease, which takes us from the open plains of Umuaro into the crowded, contradictory internal world of Lagos.
And the external shock has now become internal decay, embodied by Obi Okonkwo.
The grandson of the original Okonkwo.
Right. And the generational schism is stark. Obi's father, Isaac Okonkwo, was an early Christian convert, so committed that he refused to attend his own father's funeral.
The original Okonkwo's funeral. Wow.
So Obi is the third generation, the educated pioneer. He's a product of colonialism, but he faces a uniquely modern problem: crippling debt and crushing social expectation.
Obi was the golden child, the first scholarship recipient from the Umuofia Progressive Union Lagos branch.
And the UPU taxed themselves mercilessly, pooling their meager resources to raise £800 to send Obi to England, expecting him to return with a law degree.
And the money had to be repaid in 4 years.
This is the critical economic pivot point for the entire trilogy. The UPU's expectation was clear: he would return and handle their land cases, bring knowledge and prestige.
And the elders' warnings were sharp and specific. He must not chase the sweet things of the flesh or marry a white woman.
He must not be rain wasted in the forest. I mean, the community invested everything, and now they earned him.
But Obi demonstrates a fatal self-will from the start. He reads English instead of law.
Right. Returning with a degree of intellectual independence, but without the immediately practical, high-earning degree the union expected.
And despite getting this highly prestigious senior service post in the civil service, his salary of 4,710 senzo a month is immediately decimated by the demand that he repay £20 monthly to the UPU.
Achebe is explicit about this. This immense, non-negotiable financial pressure is the root cause of all his troubles. The system that created him, the system of collective communal investment, simultaneously suffocated his ability to live honestly in the new modern structure.
So he's fundamentally compromised before he even begins his job.
Completely.
And this financial stress then collides with the most tenacious aspect of the old culture, the Osu stigma.
Obi falls deeply in love with Clara, a highly educated nurse, only to discover she is Osu.
An outcast.
An outcast dedicated to a god. And this revelation proves that the old ways still hold absolute power, even among the converted elite.
Obi's father, Isaac Okonkwo, a man who abandoned his traditional father's funeral for Christianity.
He declares instantly he cannot marry the girl. The traditional caste system just overrides every single Christian principle of equality or love he supposedly holds.
The pressure exerted on Obi is unimaginable. His mother, frail and elderly, delivers the final psychological weapon.
She threatens to commit suicide if Obi marries Clara while she is alive,
forcing him to choose between love and the physical life of his mother.
He is paralyzed. He can't stand up to the family's ancient toxic taboo, and his inability to resolve the situation causes Clara to leave him after she becomes pregnant.
Which leads to the need for a secret abortion, which costs £30, a massive unbudgeted sum that completely shatters his precarious financial stability.
Yeah, that's the tipping point.
We see his moral slide accelerate so rapidly after that. Initially, Obi was a tiger. He had this early victory refusing a bribe from a Mr. Mark who wanted a scholarship for his sister.
He felt morally superior then, having won his first battle against the system.
But the moral landscape of Lagos is far more complicated than the straightforward bribery of a scholarship request. Achebe provides vital cultural context here about the nature of kola, the bribe.
Right. In the Nigerian civil service, a man expects you to accept a token of thanks or a facilitation fee. It's often viewed as a gift, something essential for maintaining social relationships.
And the sources suggest a shocking reversal. You may cause more trouble by refusing a bribe than by accepting it.
To the African mind, refusing the kola shows a grave danger in that kind of silence. It suggests an unpredictable moral rigidity that disrupts the social equilibrium. Obi is expected to play the game, and his early refusal marks him as an outsider.
His resistance finally collapses under the combined weight of the £30 abortion fee, his crushing UPU debt, and severe overdrafts. He is financially drowning.
And the very community that celebrated his return is, ironically, the primary source of the pressure pushing him toward crime.
The inevitable fall is tragic and quick, described in the final scene. A man in an expensive agbada, a symbol of wealth and status in Lagos, offers Obi £50 cash for a scholarship for his son.
And Obi, no longer the tiger, just accepts the money. His initial moral conviction, which survived the Colonial Service's corruption attempts, failed to survive the crushing weight of his own social obligations and personal failures.
This sets the stage for Achebe's profound commentary on modern Nigeria.
The civil service itself is depicted as an alien institution. It wasn't built by the people or for the people. It was imported by the British. Therefore, the people's immediate business was to get as much from it as they could without getting into trouble.
It's viewed as a foreign object to be extracted from, not a public service to be upheld.
Yeah, and the pervasive nature of corruption is highlighted with this bleak irony. The chairman of the interview board, during a civil service job interview, asks the sleeping candidate, "Why do you want a job?" "So that you could take bribes."
It's an open secret, an accepted flaw in the institutional design.
And Obi's final realization is one of devastating complexity. He concludes that tragedy in the African context is not simple or swift, like the European concept of a hero's single fatal flaw.
He recalls an old man, a Christian convert, who said life was like a bowl of wormwood which one sips a little at a time, world without end.
That quote just perfectly encapsulates the trilogy's conclusion.
And it contrasts so sharply with the simplistic European view of tragedy. I mean, remember the original district commissioner in Things Fall Apart?
Yeah.
He planned to dedicate a single dismissive paragraph to Okonkwo's suicide in his memoir, which he intended to title The Pacification of the Primitive Tribes of the Lower Niger.
He saw tragedy as a footnote. Achebe shows it as an epic, multi-generational wormwood.
So looking back across the three novels, Achebe provides this devastating, clear arc of change. We begin in Okonkwo's Umuofia, a coherent, structured, fierce, and functioning world.
Governed by internal logic, men of title, and ancestral spirits.
But the system was functional only until the external pressure arrived, the administration and the missionaries. And this pressure just fundamentally dismantled traditional authority.
It did. And in Arrow of God, Zulu tries to strategically navigate this change, but his pride leads him to use his spiritual power as a weapon against his own people.
Which, through the pragmatism of the yam harvest crisis, ultimately causes the community to abandon him for the new religion. The god Ulu collapses not under philosophical attack,
but under economic pressure.
And finally, we arrive at the educated, modern generation of Obi Okonkwo in Lagos, where the pressure becomes entirely internalized.
The initial external shock of the colonial invasion has given way to a relentless internal corrosion. The logic of survival for the educated elite, who were supposed to be the ethical foundation of the new nation, is warped into corruption.
Fueled by the very communal debt imposed by the people they were meant to serve. It's so ironic.
Achebe's brilliance lies in his refusal to romanticize the pre-colonial past while insisting on its validity. He weaves those specific details of Igbo life words like labala, the fear of weakness, chi, destiny combined with will, and egugu, the masked law.
He weaves them with these universal themes of power and failure. He provided the texture of a real civilization, which makes its destruction feel so devastatingly real.
He also understood the difference in power structures, symbolized perfectly by the difference between the white man's writing and the traditions of Igbo women.
Right. He compares the white man's records law, records administration to uli that never fades.
That analogy is immensely powerful. Uli is the temporary black artistic pattern Igbo women traditionally drew on their bodies. It was beautiful, but it was temporary. It faded.
But the white man's writing was permanent. Law, contracts, boundaries, these were permanent marks that govern the land, demonstrating the absolute power imbalance inherent in colonialism.
The written word was permanence. The indigenous culture was seen as ephemeral art.
The entire trilogy forces you to confront the immense cost of modernity. We started with the custom that a man should not, out of pride and etiquette, swallow his phlegm. It was a matter of dignity.
But the sources suggest that the structure of the modern state, the imported alien civil service, combined with the crushing debt imposed by the Umuofia Progressive Union, demands that Obi Okonkwo swallow something far more toxic.
His moral conviction.
Exactly. To survive, he had to compromise the very ethics he was educated to uphold.
The ultimate tragedy, perhaps, isn't just Obi's personal failure in taking a bribe, but the fact that the path to ethical governance was structurally sabotaged from the very moment he took that scholarship money.
He was set up to fail. A cripple by debt and expectation, forced to choose between his family, his love, and his moral center.
It raises a final provocative thought for you to carry forward.
When a community invests everything it has in lifting up one member, incurring massive debt and expectation in the process, does the failure of that member, when they succumb to corruption, belong primarily to the individual who fell?
Or to the crippling, structurally compromised system of patronage and debt that made ethical success nearly impossible?
Achebe's profound answer across all three generations is that the ultimate tragedy belongs to both.